Hey y'all, Ty here. Back on the roof. It's like in the 70s today in sunny Denver, Colorado. And I've been thinking a lot lately about burnout and taking a break. And I know we've talked about this in the past, and we've heard from Rob recently on this topic too. And I think it feels to me like there's just a lot of people right now who are in a rut. And I just want to provide a little bit of motivation and inspiration because I myself have also gone through ruts, most recently in the last few weeks. For the first time in 8 months, I actually only posted one video, whereas normally I post 2 videos. So I had to overcome this break in consistency that I've been touting for the last 8 months. And I think when you take a break from something like that, it can have a negative impact on your, just like you kind of get down on yourself if you feel like you're letting yourself down, if you don't follow through on these commitments that you've created for yourself. But I want to stress the importance of not letting artificial or self-prescribed targets or goals or deadlines get you to a point where your mental health is at risk, right? Where you're feeling overly bad about it. Because at the end of the day, these are all things that we have control over, that we can modify and adjust, and that we can just take a step back from. You can take your foot off the gas for a little bit, recharge, reset, come back a little more motivated and energized, maybe a little more creative. And I think a lot of this has to do with stepping away from YouTube, especially if you're like me and you tend to think about it constantly, is what can you almost do to distract yourself from it, right? What can you do to intentionally unplug from YouTube? Meaning, don't look at your computer, don't look at your phone, don't talk about it, don't read about it, don't watch videos. Like, just do all the things to distract yourself, because sometimes when your focus is shifted elsewhere, when you do end up going back to work on YouTube things, you are coming back from, a more fresh perspective. And I think that's really, really important to have. So, I think one thing for newer folks to really keep in mind is that, and this is again my experience, when I first started out, I was really hot and heavy, super motivated, like really gung-ho, let's do this, right? And I've been watching a lot of creators who are also kind of in that same modality of like, let's just rock it. And then you get all this like initial momentum, you start to feel more comfortable, you get a little bit quicker with your editing, and you start to learn more. So you're, making videos on more complex topics. You start to see this growth. So you feel really good about your channel. You feel proud of some of the initial hurdles you've overcome. And that's good fuel for like a good 4-6+ months. But then something happens, at least for me, this happened, where you start to get into like a lull, right? Like the growth slows down. You feel like you're in a content drought. You feel like you're spending too much time on it. You just don't have the energy or the motivation or the fire that you had in those first 6 months. And it's almost like a bit of a downward spiral, because you put in less effort and therefore the videos get less views. And then like maybe your mood suffers, and maybe that shows up on camera. And so it can have this like negative downward effect. And I think just be on the lookout for that, because it's entirely possible that can happen for folks who haven't made it that far yet. And so I've been reading a book called The Dip, and I actually saw this book talked about by another creator named Dea, and I'll put a link to her video in the description. But this book really calls out this idea where you see this like initial momentum and surge, and that's highly motivating, but then you fall into this lull, and the lull seems like you're never going to get out of it. It feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And then you start to question everything. And there's all this self-doubt. You lose all your motivation. You don't really know how to push through. And the book talks about how this dip is actually a good thing. It's your ally, because the dip is what weeds out all of your competition. Because if everybody goes through this dip, and I'm convinced that everybody does, even people who I admire on YouTube, who I've talked to recently, they've been in dips and lulls. And it's just one of those things where you just kind of have to keep plowing through regardless of how hard it is. But therein lies the challenge, because not everyone has the motivation or, the persistence to push through. And so in that dip that most people get to, that's where most people check out. And then it's only the people that push through to the other side where they see this, again, almost like exponential spike in growth, in progress, in improvement, in mood and motivation. And what they'll find when they're on the other side of that dip is that there are far fewer people to compete with, because a lot of people have dipped out like during the dip. So in a way, the dip is a good thing because it weeds out competition. It makes you stand out more once you get to the other side. But that is challenge, is like, how do you get through the dip? So I don't know if I have a good answer for you on that, just to be honest and transparent, but I will tell you some of the things that I was doing over the last maybe 5-6 weeks as I was kind of working through the lull that I was in is, I think one of the things that helped me get through it was I stopped working as much. And that might be counterintuitive because you might think, well, I'm not performing as well. I need to put in more hours. But I think that's the wrong approach. I think I was pushing myself too hard and it's having diminishing returns. So I'm actually sleeping in a little bit later. And one of the other things that I'm highly focused in on is like, what are the 1 to 2 potential things that are going to move the needle the most, that make absolutely everything so much easier? And if that one thing is just creating content or better content, and that's going to pull in more views, more AdSense, more leads, then you don't really need to focus as much on like your lead generation mechanism or, fine tuning other parts of your maybe potential YouTube business that you're working on. So for me, like I kind of worked on a lot of other business aspects over the last 6 weeks that weren't directly related to content creation. And maybe in a way that had a negative effect on my mood about creating content, or just left me in a content drought where I didn't have a lot of creativity or motivation. So in a way, if you just focus in and dial in and get really good at the one thing that's going to move the needle, then maybe that's the one thing to spend the time on and everything else is just secondary. And so I've been doing a lot of time blocking on my calendar, and I've been finding that I'm pretty distracted even though I do the time blocking. So like, maybe I'm doing too much time blocking. Maybe I am giving myself too many tasks to work on or too many things to think about. At the end of the day, it should all be about, like Dave talks about in his marketing videos, is awareness. And that's going to solve so many problems in anyone's income generating business. Like if that's your goal on YouTube, to make money, then the biggest and most important thing you can possibly do is create content that generates awareness for you and your brand and your channel. Everything else is meaningless, because if people see your content, you grow your subscribers, even if you don't have a sales funnel, you may still get people reaching out to you saying, hey, can I book you for coaching? So it's like you're getting all this organic, you almost like people are like jumping into your funnel without you even asking. So anyway, all that to say, I think it's just about simplifying and remembering the initial mission and vision of what you're trying to do. And for me, I don't always do the best job of reminding myself what the goal of my YouTube channel is. I don't always see too far into the future about what I want to accomplish or achieve. I've sort of just like watched other gurus and thought to myself, well, they have a really cool business. Like I really want to aspire to be more like them. I'm going to try and take some steps in that direction. And I feel like that's a good approach, but you also need more clarity. And I think you need to come back to your original vision and mission and, try to remind yourself why you're doing this whole thing to begin with. Is it for fun? Is it for pleasure? Is it to make money? Is it a combination of things? And also know that your vision and mission can change over time. It just depends on how deep you get into this thing. And, maybe what you want when you first start is just to feel it out and try it. And that's cool. But then like 6-8 months in, you realize, oh man, like I really want to make this a full-time thing. I really want to make this my, my life and my finances, my financial engine for my lifestyle. So I don't know. I think it just comes back to the basics, right? It sounds so simplistic in nature. And like for me, when I was in my content drought, I was probably overthinking the topics, and I was dreading making videos because I was anticipating so much editing. And I think you got to come back to experimentation and trying different video formats. Like lately I've been using Ecamm Live for some of my videos so that I can just share my screen in a simple and elegant way and share some slides that I could just talk through. And that way in post, I don't have to do a ton of editing. And you guys will have to be the judge to let me know if that content style works for you. But at the end of the day, I needed to do something to lighten the load, but that was still what I thought would be impactful and valuable for the viewers. And it was a lot of coming back to the basics and just like focusing in on what are some of the core things that people need help with without overthinking and without trying to, I don't know, like reinvent the wheel every single time, you know, because every video you make isn't going to just land with the same viewers that you've always been speaking to over the last 8 months. You're going to always find newer viewers who haven't seen you before. And so you can repeat topics, you can revisit beginner style videos. So that's kind of what I've done for some of my recent videos. And at the end of the day, it is a numbers game. It's about consistency. It's about showing up, and it's about, you know, the fundamentals and trying to stay true to your vision and mission, and just, you know, not overthinking it, because that's the death of really any YouTuber. And that's where we get stuck in the dip, is overthinking every step that we take rather than just taking a lot of action to get through the dip. So hopefully this is helpful to you guys. I know motivation and inspiration are two of the biggest things on YouTube that keep us either going or not. And so if you're struggling with either, I would encourage you to find a community, even if it's not mine. And I know I talk about my community a lot. I have a link in the description if you're interested, but find a community of people who can be your sounding board, or whose shoulder you can put your head on when you are feeling down and defeated. Because I think if I didn't have my community, I'd be lost. I'd be kind of checked out, you know, because like the days where I feel like I have no energy or motivation, when I get on a group call with my community, it's like a light switch. I feel so energized and I feel so motivated, because these people are so spunky and chatty, and that's like the opposite of me, right? So like their energy gives me energy, and the fact that they coalesce around our shared vision for our community, and they bring fresh ideas, and they're a sounding board for each other, and they're honest and candid with their feedback. It's like a jolt of fresh air for me, and it really helps me out. So anyways, find a community that works for you. Find some people that can be that jolt of energy for you, because I think everybody needs that. And if you don't have it, it's going to be a really, really hard time to get out of this rut yourself. So that's my appeal to you. That's my CTA, if you will. Anyways, I hope this video found you well. Have a great one, and I'll talk to you guys soon.